Hello everyone, Reza here and welcome to another how-to video from our Unreal Engine series. In this video, I'll respond to a question from one of our Patreon members, Molly White, to demonstrate techniques for UV coordinates in Unreal Engine and how to have more controls over the tiling and the position of our UVs. That's actually a very good question, so let's dive right in and explore this topic together. All right, Epic Games is open, so I'm just going to go launch to fire up Unreal Engine. I'm going to use just a blank scene. Probably don't need starter content, don't need ray tracing. It's already set to Unreal 5 lessons in my case. And as for the project, I'm just going to call this lesson 8 underscore UVs. I'm just going to go and create. So we have the starter pack. We may or may not want to use this, but in my case, I'm not really going to use it. Instead, I'm going to go to File, New Level, and I'm going to pick Basic. Right off the bat, I'm just going to start creating my own folder. So lesson 8 underscore UV. Within that, I'm going to create one folder for materials and another folder for textures. And of course, we have levels as well. I would like to have another folder for levels since we have a brand new level. And then I'm going to go save current level, and I'm just going to put that into my levels. We're going to call this UV level. And we're good to go. So with that, I'm going to go to textures and I'm going to import certain textures. I've got albedo, ambient occlusion, normal, and roughness. I'm just going to bring all four. Let's check their color space before we move forward. I'm actually going to dock in layout and bring it as a floating window so I don't need to constantly press Alt spacebar. So double click, and albedo does not have sRGB values, so make sure that sRGB is on. Save, going to the next one, ambient occlusion, sRGB off, good. Normals, there is no normal, so it doesn't really recognize this as normal map. That's fine. I'm going to go to texture group and categorize this as world normal map. And in compression settings, I also set that as normal map. Now it recognizes this as normal map. Fantastic. Let's check our roughness. Make sure it's set to linear. sRGB has been ticked off, meaning that it's a linear map. Okay, fantastic. Now with those four, let's create our first material. So I'm just going to right click on the material, go to material. I'm going to call this master material and floor. It can be any name really, as long as you have or mi for material instance or master material. I think what comes next is really up to you. We have our material here and we need to bring our textures. So I'm going to select all four, bring it in. And by the way, I did go over this process during the introduction to material video, so make sure to check that out. That's why I'm a little bit fast with the organization this time around. So if you want a sort of a slower, in-depth video on that, definitely check introduction to material in the Unreal Engine 5 series playlist. So albedo goes to base color, ambient occlusion goes to ambient occlusion, excuse me, that's roughness, so that's go to roughness. Ambient occlusion goes to ambient occlusion, and of course normal goes to normal. So with that out of the way, we need to think about, all right, how to tile this material. First things first, I'm going to apply it. I am going to save it, and before I get ahead of myself, I am actually going to go in here, right click, and create a material instance, because that's the one that I would like to assign to the floor. So I'm going to call this MI floor, and I can remove the word instance. And if I open it, there is actually nothing in there because I haven't parameterized anything. I can start parameterizing these texture samples to replace these textures at any point of time inside the material instance. But of course, the focus of this tutorial is on the UV coordinates. Now, every time you would like to basically plug more information to the UVs, you need to think about texture coordinates. So if I bring texture coordinates, this expression, I'm going to press Alt and unplug it for now. This expression outputs UV texture coordinates in a form of a sort of a two channel. So if you look at here, we've got U tiling and V tiling, but we are going to see how we can export or extract this U tiling and V tiling out of this UV texture coordinates and have it as a parameter on our material instance. Now, let's say we just want to focus on tiling. Well, if you press M on your keyboard with left click, we bring multiply, and multiply allows you to plug your texture coordinates to your UVs and specify intensity with a simple scalar value. So it can be 0 to 1, it can be 0 to 10, it can be 0 to 100, but that value comes from a single channel constant or a scalar expression. So I'm holding down 1 on the keyboard, left click, and I get my scalar expression. So now this has got a default value. I can set that default value set to 1 and drag and drop that or plug that to the B channel. Obviously, if you have this setup, this means that you need to apply the exact same UV coordinates to other maps as well, because you cannot just tile your albedo or base color and forget about your roughness and normal and ambient occlusion. So all these UVs will be plugged into that multiply. Now, what node do we need to parameterize in order to see the effect in our material instance? Because our material instance has been set up for this particular reason. As a matter of fact, I am going to select my material instance and drag and drop it on the ground. So you can see our ground gets something. First things first, it's fairly flat, which we need to address. And of course, it hasn't been tiled properly. So in here, in order to parameterize this texture coordinate setup, we usually parameterize the scalar value. Remember, the default setup was set to 1. I can just right click and say convert to parameter, and I'm going to call this tiling, knowing that this node is in charge of tiling. The default value is set to 1. You can set min and max. For example, min can be 0, max can be 100, so don't go over 100, which really doesn't make any sense. If you go over 100 with tiling, you may want to go over, I don't know, if the situation calls for it. In that case, it would be a good idea to set up basically a value in there so it caps it. Makes it a lot easier for others to interact with your node tree as well. So I'm going to go apply and I'm going to go save. And now if I go to my material instance, I have tiling appearing here. So if I go to my level and bring this as a floating window, you can see that I can now start tiling this on the fly without using any compiling time. The normal is getting really under my skin because I feel like there is actually no normals in here. So what I probably should be doing is to go in here, and intensify the normals. So I'm just going to pull that out. There is a really nice material function for that, and it's called flatten normal. It's a function specifically made for this particular purpose. So I'm going to hold down Control and plug that in here and put the result back to normal. And of course, very similar to texture coordinates, to play around with the value of the normal, I need to have a scalar value. Just a single constant channel will get the job done. So I'm just going to hold down one left click and get that value plugged into flatness. I can now right click and call this convert to parameters, and I'm going to call this normal intensity. That makes sense. Now I can go just set that to something like 4, and instantly we are getting some results in here. I'm going to go apply, and I'm going to go and save. And if I go to my material level and go to material folder, bring up my material instance, now we have this normal scale, which I can easily play around with. Remember that I did set that to plus, but you can always go to minus. As long as you don't have any min and max cap, you can really go over this and change it however you want. That looks kind of better. And I think just a little bit of a lower tiling can really work better. In my case, I'm going to go show to and turn off grid. I think that works much better, like so. All right, cool. So you can see that's pretty much how you handle simple UV tiling in Unreal Engine. Now let's go to the next chapter and see how we can gain more control over this scenario. And that's probably going to address the question from Patreon member, and hopefully that is going to clarify this topic further. Now I've gone ahead and parameterized my albedo, roughness, normal, and ambient occlusion map. So when you save under texture rollout, now you have access to albedo, ambient occlusion, normal, and roughness. You can turn them on and off as you wish, but that allows me to kind of change the map for this particular chapter. So I'm just going to go ahead in here, going to bring my material instance to another monitor, and I'm going to go in here and pick albedo and normal and roughness, well, this one, for this particular example. This albedo has got sRGB, so that looks correct. I'm just going to check other maps. The normal has already been detected as normal, fantastic, and lucky last. Roughness, that needs to be turned off. Our roughness is a linear map. And I'm going to open my material instance, bring it over, and I'm going to start changing those maps. I'm going to go to texture, just bring out the new albedo, assign it, and then go to the new normal, drag and drop. And of course, you can, at any point of time, click in here and find a roughness or any map that you want. And of course, you will get that. It's all good. Save. Now, let's see how we can gain more controls over the tiling of the material. And after all, that's why we have this session, to see how we can dive a little bit deeper. Right now, I have only a scalar value for one single channel. It's just a simple constant expression, and it's got one value on one value only. So if I were to have two values for U and V, I need the secondary one. So I'm just going to copy and paste that, or press one left click to create another scalar value and turn it into a parameter. Now I'm going to call this tile U, and the next one is going to be tile V. Now I have two, and the default value for both of them are the same. I can connect those and add them into our multiply. Right now our multiply only gets one input, so I need to find a way to add these two using an expression. Now, to combine channels together to create a vector, I tend to use a node called append vector. And that's exactly what append vector does. This expression allows you to combine channels together to create a vector with more channels. So I'm just going to go plug this tile V to B, and I'm going to press Control, drag tile U to A, and now we have these two channels feed into this append. We can connect that into our B. Now we get tile U, tile V, and if you look at here, if I go and apply, all of a sudden what we get is tiling U and V. If I go and save and go to my main level, you can see I'm going to go and set this to default. I'm going to zoom back a little bit so you see what's going on. Let's say I just want to ever so slightly add to tile U, basically tile my horizontal level more. You can see all of a sudden I'm getting almost like a new material. So I'm just tiling it in one direction and leaving the vertical direction or Y direction completely intact. That gives you more control. Now, that looks really nice and that encourages me to do more. Let's do more actually. Let's in the next chapter go and see how we can offset our materials in U and V. Now we have tiling U and V sorted. I think what I would like to do is to put them under a rollout. So I'm just going to go into group and just going to call this tiling, and that gets its own group. I'm going to do the same thing, pick tiling, and now if I apply, they actually go into a separate rollout by themselves. Looks much nicer and much cleaner. Now let's see how we can sort out the offset side of things. So I'm going to minimize my material instance and see how we can add to what we have right now to have the ability to offset our material as well. Needless to say, again, offsetting U, offsetting V, I need to have two scalar values. So I'm just going to very quickly call this offset U and offset V, basically X and Y. I'm going to bring this over. Now I need to, again, because I'm going to combine them, I need to append them. So I'm just going to go and put append vector, bring A to A and B to B. But how can I add that to a multiply? So basically this multiply has already got its own system and it's working really well. I just need to add this to the mix. Well, there I said it. I need to add them. So this add is great. It's a great expression just to add two sort of lerp nodes together. So obviously we did talk about lerp nodes, and lerp nodes are actually combined materials. So if I go in here and give the append to add B channel and then holding down Control and dragging all of these outputs and plug them to add, all I need to do is just to also add my multiply to A. There you go. So this append offsets everything. This append tiles everything. How much tiling are we going to get? Gets controlled by texture coordinates, and the value of the tiling gets controlled by the scalar values, and offset same deal, and that add actually goes directly to our UV channels. And you can see that we've got dealing with basically two constants, and two constants are here and there's not much in there. This setup is perfect. Now all I need to do is just to go apply, go ahead and save it and bring up our material instance, double click, And you can see now I have access to offset as well as UVs. Let's see how this works. I can just select U and I can just offset my material in U and offset my material in V, tile it in V. So you can see how much control we gain with our UV coordinates using a very simple node tree. So this node graph works really well. Later on, when we talk about functions, I'll show you how to put this setup into its own function, so you can save heaps of time by just calling one function to bring the entire node tree inside our material graph. That should do the trick. Thanks very much, guys, for all of your support, for all of your kind words, and thanks to our Patreon members for all these great suggestions. Please keep them coming. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, where I talk about all the upcoming projects, and if there is any new video, you will get notification there too. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Until the next video, see you guys later.